Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Bernard Arnault is one of the richest men in the world. He's right up there with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. But Arnault, who runs the luxury goods company LVMH, doesn't have the same name recognition as the founder of Amazon or the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX.
I knew almost nothing about him.
Brad Stone is the editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, who spent most of his career covering big tech. And Brad says it was his relative unfamiliarity with Arnault and the sprawling empire Arnault has built that made him so eager to sit down with the French billionaire.
His accomplishments are much different. He hasn't invented the future. If anything, he has marketed the past. And yet he has assembled just as much power and resources as a lot of the tech titans we think of being icons of the business world. There's a lot of value still in luxury retail, in high-end travel, in high-end spirits. It's a completely different business, right? We don't think of it in the same way as AI or e-commerce or software. And yet, in a lot of ways, it's just as influential in people's lives.
Over the last 4 decades, Arnault has acquired dozens and dozens of the world's best-known and most coveted brands, including Dior, Fendi, and Celine, Tiffany and Bulgari, Hennessy and Veuve Clicquot. LVMH's customers include kings and queens and presidents and countless celebrities and supermodels all over the world.
He's an icon. He's extraordinarily admired. Even people in Silicon Valley, in tech, have started to look at Arnault and the LVMH playbook with a lot of admiration.
Other executives, Brad says, marvel at what Arnault has put together. It's an unrivaled portfolio of more than 70 brands. But LVMH also has an elaborate marketing arm and a collection of some of the most valuable real estate in the world. It's a profit-making machine.
I do think Arnault has now emerged as one of these business leaders whose playbook should be copied and emulated.
I'm David Gura, and this is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. On today's show, Bernard Arnault, the hard-driving, multi-billionaire businessman who's come to be known as the Wolf in Cashmere. Just how did he build this empire and turn it into that profit-making machine? After months of trying, Bloomberg Businessweek editor Brad Stone and Angelina Rascouët, who covers luxury goods for Bloomberg, landed a rare interview with Bernard Arnault, who almost never speaks to journalists. He invited them to LVMH's headquarters in Paris's opulent 8th arrondissement.
We're led into a conference room with this extraordinary art on the walls. 3 Warhols, a Picasso, of course, leaning in the corner, waiting to be hung, grand views of Paris outside the window. Mr. Arnault comes in. I mean, what can you say? I've spent a career interviewing the schlubs of tech, and Arnault is exquisitely dressed, a Dior suit, Berluti shoes, just an aura of elegance that you really don't find, or I haven't found in most of the business executives I've interviewed in my career.
Brad, you put on your suit, your one suit for the...
I did. I dusted. Yeah, he was wearing Dior and Berluti. I had on Suit Supply and Nordstrom Rack. But still, it made for a good photo.
Arnault has climbed and clawed his way to the top from his childhood in northern France. His mom was a pharmacist, and Arnault started out at the family construction company. But Angelina says he had an epiphany about what the rest of his career could look like on a trip to the United States.
He was talking to a taxi driver in New York City, and he asked them, what's the most famous person that you know? Do you know the name of the French president? The person couldn't name the French president.
The one famous French person the cab driver could name was legendary fashion designer Christian Dior. And that stuck with Arnault, who went on to buy that brand out of bankruptcy in 1984. In the years that followed, Arnault acquired other fashion houses, along with watchmakers and jewelry designers, and the cosmetics retailer Sephora. Brad, when you look at this company as a whole, how do all of these brands work together?
Yeah, to the casual shopper, it may seem like they're totally separate, but behind the scenes, there are incredible synergies and economies of scale from the supply chain to marketing, the way in which they can command lower rates across all the media properties in the world, to executives who will shuffle from one brand to the other. So lots of synergies behind the scenes and ways in which it's just easier for them to go and hire celebrities, hire ambassadors, sponsor the Olympics. They're a primary sponsor of the Paris Olympics.
Brad says Arnault's empire has a huge real estate footprint.
He has literally exported luxury and all the little decisions and details that go into it all around the world.
There are other luxury groups that own other brands, but really in that scale, he's pretty unique.
One of the secrets to his success, which is also the envy of LVMH's rivals, is Arnault's understanding of the magic and the power of celebrity, which Brad says goes back to the early days of Arnault's career.
He had his designer reinvent the Dior handbag line. And in the 90s, Lady Diana, on one of her trips to South America, was carrying the bag. A global frenzy ensued. They renamed it the Lady Dior bag, and they sold hundreds of thousands of them. He's just done that again and again.
Luxury goods are a high-margin business, Brad says, and to succeed, a company like LVMH has to strike a very delicate balance.
You know, you might be selling a $100 handbag for $1,000 or more. And so what are people buying? They're buying a brand. They're buying an essence. They're buying maybe the way in which their friends or people will think of them if they're holding the item. And so Arnault recognized that you need to invest these brands in desirability and elegance. And that is what he has done so well.
And Arnault is preoccupied with desirability, Angelina says.
The tricky question is, how do you make sure you keep on growing, revenue for your brands while not overexposing them? That's really a very difficult one to hit. Some of the luxury brands out there, they can be overexposed, and that's very difficult. So yeah, that's his obsession.
In an economy where luxury can be increasingly out of reach and questions swirl about the ethics of producing and selling high-end goods at a markup, Arnault's brands are still desired by so many, and they're seen as status symbols by the most fashionable and powerful people in the world. So how does he do it? What's happening inside the C-suite at LVMH? And how is Arnault setting up the company to carry on when he's no longer running it? That's after the break. LVMH is a $400 billion company. It had 213,000 employees at the end of last year. That's more than Apple. And Bloomberg's Angelina Rascouët says Bernard Arnault is intimately involved in every aspect of the business.
Every Saturday, Bernard Arnault is known to drop in on his stores. So, of course, he's at the fashion shows. Of course, he's, meeting, hanging out with the creative people. But, his business, at the end of the day, is retail, and retail is detail. So he'll go into the stores, and then he'll talk to the sales assistant, and then he'll, send emails or text to his managers telling him what he thinks and how this bag this category should be exhibited somewhere else.
Perhaps unsurprisingly then, Arnault also has a reputation for being a bit of a micromanager. He's concerned with details as specific as the brand of shoes that sales associates wear in his stores. Obviously, he wants them to wear LVMH brands head to toe. He's involved in the day-to-day in a way Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos aren't anymore at the companies they started. Well, I asked Brad Stone if he caught glimpses of that fastidiousness when he talked to Arnault, and if Arnault is involved in the nitty-gritty on the creative side of the business. Is he telling Grammy winner Pharrell Williams, who's now one of the creative directors at Louis Vuitton, what he should and shouldn't do?
David, I don't get the impression that there is any aspect of the business that Mr. Arnault is not involved in. Look, does he go and micromanage the actual sort of camouflage design on the menswear jacket at Louis Vuitton? Probably not. But he is certainly involved in the hiring of the creative directors and the ambassadors at every house. Look, I think he looks at everything, not just the creative side, but the executives and how each business is run and how it's doing on a daily and weekly basis.
Given Arnault's relentless focus on image and reputation, I wanted to understand from Angelina how he's navigating another hot-button issue at his companies: recent reporting of unsafe and illegal labor practices in the factories that make LVMH goods.
Sometimes You do your best to do traceability, tracking all these labor conditions, but sometimes when it's too removed, yes, there's struggle, and even LVMH has struggle.
And recent Bloomberg reporting we featured on this podcast, found serious problems in LVMH-owned Loro Piana's supply chain, including paltry compensation for indigenous workers in Peru who shear the wool used in some of the world's most expensive sweaters.
Their response was like, we'll look into it and we'll make sure to fix what we can fix.
At the time of Bloomberg's reporting, Loro Piana also stressed their economic support for the local community. Arnault's degree of involvement in his company raises another question. What happens when he's no longer at the helm? His age, now 75, has outside observers looking for clues about what LVMH's future could look like. He recently raised the CEO retirement age at the company from 75 to 80, and Warren Buffett wrote to him after that to tell Arnault he made a mistake, setting that new limit so low. Buffett, who is 93, still runs Berkshire Hathaway.
The big question is who will succeed him when he's no longer around. And obviously some of the candidates include his 5 children who all work inside LVMH.
And they're all seen as potential heirs or heiresses apparent. Arnault's eldest daughter is the CEO of Christian Dior Couture. His eldest son is an executive at LVMH. Another son is the number 2 at Tiffany. And his 2 youngest sons are involved in the company's watch business, which, Brad says, is an area where LVMH might make more acquisitions.
He has brought more kind of thinking and precision to succession than I've seen almost anywhere, right? And the way in which they have designed the holding companies, the way in which the 5 kids who all have equal shares of one of the holding companies have to agree for a period of many decades. None of them can withdraw from the business. They can't unilaterally pass any major strategic decisions. And so he's thought not just about succession, but about preserving the peace among his heirs. And that is where so many other family-owned companies have suffered. So he's really thought about how to avoid the famous pitfalls. This is not the Roy family.
For now, though, Arnault says he has no plans to retire. He'll keep visiting stores every Saturday as long as he can.
This is an ambition-fueled, multi-decade spree to develop an unassailable and generations-long empire in luxury. I think like this guy, even though people talk about retirement, they talk about succession, he is still in empire-building mode. And I don't think he will stop until he has to.
This is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. I'm David Gura. Today's episode is produced by Thomas Liu. It was edited by Aaron Edwards. It was fact-checked by Arafat Jalasso-Perry and Adriana Tapia. It was mixed by Blake Maples. Kim Gittleson and Naomi Shaven are our senior producers. Nicole Beamsterboer is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. Please follow and review The Big Take wherever you get your podcasts. It helps new listeners find the show. We'll be back tomorrow.